Oh, it's a crazy world out there. You may have plans. They might be based on our past reality, and not that long ago. I thought I longed for certain places and have revisited them, only to realize they're either not as I remember them or just undesirable, overpopulated, and not that we have an overpopulation problem. I just got back from a road trip and essentially drove 2 hours through nothing. There's a lot of places in Utah and Colorado where you can drive 2 hours and not have a gas station or even see a car. I'd like to share some of the footage I took, perhaps at the end. For now, we're going to look at Forts of America. Thank you for being here. I love you all. God bless and welcome. So, Forts of America. The Star Fort is pretty interesting because it's very shocking. Many of the things we discuss, buildings built in the 1800s, all over the realm, people will say, oh, colonialists built them. And I think we've established that it's not that simple. Most of this history is left out when we're taught in school. I mean, everything is a log cabin, a Native American in a teepee, even the movies. Look at all the old West movies. Never did we see the old world that we examine week after week. Where was the Greco-Roman Capitol building, or the Gothic cathedral, or even the World's Fairs in any of the Old West movies? Not a peep. It would be laughable. We're going to the World's Fair. It's over 300 miles, dear. These old horses won't make it. And many of us question whether our vehicles would make it 300 miles today without some kind of repair or service before hitting the road. And your wagon had better be set up like an RV. I mean, you have to have everything in there. Cooking, heating. How many nights will you have to camp on any trip in this early time period? So here we're looking at Fort Trumbull State Park and Museum. Really interesting. This appears to be in Connecticut. Just a little unknown state park in Connecticut. And we can see all the artificial coastline that has been built out here and over here. Look at this square here. Now junk. But anyway, this Star Fort. What's this? And look here. Look at this building near this parking lot. Let's see if they let us have a look. No look. So today I thought we would just have a little look at how many Star Forts we could check out in America in the allotted time that we have. Fort Trumbull was built between 1839 and 1852. Here, some painting in an early time period. And we can see this list. We have Alabama, Alaska, Arizona, Arkansas, Connecticut. I mean, who knew of all these forts? Here's one called Fort Proctor. Who's ever heard of Fort Proctor? No one, because you can't even get to it. Look at this thing. Are you kidding me? Bunch of brick out here on this swamped out island. There you go. What stories would they give us about this? Looking like a computer chip, really. Fort Proctor. So it's going to be difficult for me to blast through these and not look into them more. I mean, this is amazing. This is off the edge of Lake Borg. No, I know it's not pronounced like that. I just wanted to say Borg in Louisiana. The fort was never fully constructed. Oh, I wonder why. It's in the middle of the water and sits 200 feet from the edge of the lake. There we go. Here were taxpayer dollars, I guess, in early America. Yes. So, Fort Popham. Ham, again in the water. During the American Revolution, another fort stood on the site, and in 1808, the federal government built a small battery, and whatever. Look at this. Ruins. American arched ruins of block and brick, and totally unknown. And maybe if you saw one, you wouldn't ask questions. If you hadn't seen all the Star Forts all over the world, you might not ask questions. But especially when we start looking at all these American forts. Here's the interior. Here is old America again. Again, discarded the interior, the entrance. ruins. Here we go. What kind of massive castle was this? Now just destroyed, only the base remaining. And what we can see is super impressive. The blockage I find everywhere. The finest blockage. Again, I could linger. Aerial view of Fort Livingston ruins. Here we go. Look at the brick jutting out into the ocean. These are the ruins of America. Totally unappreciated. Even if we believe their story, that these were Civil War ruins. Why in the middle of the water? I don't know. But even then, they should be more protected, more known, more celebrated. Something? No. Just discarded out here in the swamplands. We see like an old neighborhood, swamped out, roads. We see tunnels, bridges, much more to be discovered here. And here we can see it in 1995, looking the same. A little worse, I guess. I don't know. Yeah, a little more overgrown. Oh, I feel such pressure. Fort Phillip. And a lot of these, you'll notice, don't even show you the fort or the brick fortification. Oftentimes just showing you a cannon. That's it. Just shut up and look at this cannon and believe our story. Here is Fort Gorgeous. Or Georges? I'm not sure. Anyway, again, in the water, Civil War story. Look at this thing. And I don't want to get into how weird it is, or even how impossible it should be in this time period to build this on land, let alone in the ocean. I just want to paint a picture. So that was in Maine. Recently, or last week, I did a video on old abandoned Maine, and you'll see just all of these snapshots showing us cannons. But here we have Fort Pentagouet, and what do we see? We see a star fort. And then some people have built some crappy little cabins in here. Of course, why wouldn't you? If you were the first to claim this. And here is Fort Preble, 1808. Quick snapshot, blockage, zigzagging into the water. Lighthouse, another beautiful building out here in the water. What? I mean, it's impressive enough in this time period to be schlepping stones around via horse and wagon. But these fitted, precise blocks, look at this block here in the water. Yes, unbelievable. So again, I've been doing this research a while, and I haven't seen a lot of these. This one is called Fort Scammell. Yeah, a total scam. Look at this, in ruins, almost overgrown, and I prefer that. Let it be overgrown and not demolished. And again, they had a nice story, they thought, for all of these forts. Blame it on the Civil War. There we go. But I think these structures are some of the best proof for an older civilization here in North America. That's all. Fort Sumner. So you'll see they don't show us much. Fort Williams, Fort Henry. Look at Fort Henry in 1909. How old are these castle ruins? Look, next to this hut, and everyone's gathering around the old castle. And we're not even seeing the star. Here we are in Maryland. I have a friend named Berlin that lives in Maryland. Shout out, brother. And here we go. Star Fortage. Almost golf course over with this babe. Almost. Someone was itching to turn this into a golf course completely. I'm sure there is one on the edge. Fill this with sand. Anyway, just the very top poking up, looking very untouristy. I don't know why. Fort McHenry. Fort Cumberland demolished. Fort Defiance. I believe this is the one that they discovered buried. Fort McHenry, the one we just looked at. And so we have a bunch of demolished. We start to get into demolished territory. This one, Fort Smallwood Park, looks like Mayan ruins or something. Starting to have a step pyramid kind of feel. Somebody has painted it, probably because it looked a little too Mayan. Battery Hartshorn. And where is this? Maryland. Fort Washington, Massachusetts. We see one buried here. Fort Banks. Now this is interesting. This starting to look kind of European, like they've built within the old Star Fort. We see this buried, mounded up structure here. Again, having kind of a Mayan feel. This is unbelievable, actually. I felt like when it was smaller, you could see the star a little better, but we have this massive building, like millions of square feet. and most of it buried. And oftentimes in the center of these star forts, what you have is hundreds of buildings, very sterile brick buildings, very hive-like. But of course, my opinion, all of this repurposed. Some of it may have been used, but I think turning places into parks is a way to keep a lid on it so that people don't poke around too much, find their way underground, and discovering more. Fort Independence in Massachusetts. Here we go. Super star fort. A lot of old trees around it, but pretty young compared to the structure itself. And here we go. Destroyed by fire. This man has something to do with it. This clearly very indulgent man. Fort Phoenix. A lot of them in Massachusetts. Fort Ruckman. And this is an old picture. Look at this guy in this fort. Fort Sewell. There we go. All brick, underground, many stages of construction, painting it white so it doesn't look so old. And again, they're just showing us the most crude of pictures, it seems like. Any investigation into any of these forts will reveal much more. Historic Fort Rodman, New Bedford. Let me know if you've seen this many star forts. I'm really glad, actually, that they have prepared this showcase for us. Here we go, 1850 Fort Warren brick with this beautiful old world facading over the brick. All these forts. Here she is from above. Here we go. Look at this. Most of it underground, you can see. This is superior engineering, that's all. In the water, so many of these. Now, come on, really? Look at these guys leaning on this blockage that's, I don't know how many tons each block. Look at this. These guys aren't doing anything. The fort is partially buried, you can see back here. I mean, we saw in present times how much is clearly underground and not been excavated, at least for the public. Again, you never saw this fort because you can't get to it. How many islands are not islands? And this gets really heavy. This goes back to the beginning, in my opinion. I mean, forming land, really? That's why I say it's beyond a building. We're talking about building land and then super complex geometric structures on top. So how about Michigan? Here's Fort Wayne, the original barracks. So we can see a brick and stone building. Why is this a fort? This looks like a hotel, an old world hotel. Here is Fort Bellefontaine. So here we go. Here is the ruins of a fort. Trees growing on top of it, looking like it's been sitting underwater. That was Missouri. Mississippi, we have this Fort Massachusetts, of course. In the water, best place to build. And millions of bricks, even though this one is small, very complex. They have a little wooden sidewalk leading out to it, just to give you an idea of how this was just discovered recently. I mean, surely a road would have come before the building, right? You didn't take the horses down this wooden ramp. History of the fort, 1812, 1847, great. So here, even in Montana, Fort Ass something. Fort Ass, here we go, a little castle in Montana, totally normal. 1879, Fort Asinine. And here's Fort Benton in Montana. There we go. Established in 1846 as Fort Lewis. So repurposing, moving, probably burning. How about Nebraska? Now this is more like it. We see some logs in the back. We can imagine Lewis and Clark. How about Nevada? Fort Churchill. Looks like they've done the same thing as they did in New Mexico. They've covered the bricks with adobe or a stucco so that it looks southwesty. So here's one. Fort Leavenworth, closed to the public. The oldest permanent settlement in Kansas. So here we go. Dorothy and Toto. Just hang on. Fort Leavenworth, built 1827, is the second oldest active United States Army post west of Washington, D.C. Come on, look at this thing. This reminds me of a prison in Wyoming I was going to visit. I'll flash a picture of that on the screen. So you can see a fort can be whatever. They're using it as a cover story. That could have been a university. Anything. In the end, anything can be anything. And how interesting, you can see how many of these have been demolished. Many of them are closed to the public. Closed to the public. Fort Knox in Kentucky, closed to the public. Fort Constitution in New Hampshire. Look at this thing. Out on the water's edge, in ruins, rubble. The building continues. Fort Constitution, New Hampshire and Maine. Again, like in our last video. And here a depiction of what it looked like in the 19th century. I think someone sketched it. Of course, we've looked at the ruins of Fort Union in New Mexico. We have all these brick ruins, like I just said, covered in adobe. And what you'll notice is not a glimpse or a peep of the Star Fort, actively kept out of this picture that is painted on this fine site. And I'll flash a picture of the Star Fort that they don't want to show us today. And let's look at a few more. All of these will require investigation, in my opinion. There's so much more going on. This is a true picture of old America, just from the Star Fort perspective. All these supposed forts in ruins. Look at New York. Look at New York alone. Fort Amsterdam, Star Fort. So are you seeing what I'm talking about? I hope in this short window that we have, I've been able to show you old America from the point of view of the Star Fort, or just the fort. Let's just call it the fort, because they're not calling them Star Forts. Here's the inside of a building in 1850 on a fine September day. Very fine. That was in the Castle Garden. They're calling it the Castle Garden. Aerial view, Manhattan, showing Castle Garden in 1880. Let's have a little look at 1880 Manhattan. Look at this. Talk about a completely built out city. And not just stupid little log cabins. Every building is like several blocks. Are you seeing this? Look at this row right here. Massive. Some sort of Grecian temple right here. The bridge. Look at these buildings on the banks. This again looks Mayan or something. What is this back here? Super castle back here. Unbelievable. I mean, even the things that they show us. I'm amazed at what they do show us. And I guess they have no shame. They know the people are afraid to ask questions and seem crazy. The New York Aquarium, I'm getting off topic now. 1923. This, again, artificial land with structures all over it. Just a mess of old architecture here. Now it's the aquarium. Camp Hero, Fort J. Just have a little peek at Fort J. Just the entrance here. They couldn't give us a better resolution, but just to get a feel, we have a bridge going across a moat in the water. Here, much more of the building has survived, showing what it may have looked like. Again, most of them are in such ruins. Just the lower level or levels remaining. Really a candy store feeling today. So much I'd like to go deeper into any one of these, but we do what we can do. One of my favorite sayings. I don't know if it's really a saying. It should be. Here's Crown Point Fort, of course. Crown Point, America. There we go. Looking like we could be in Scotland or something. No, this is not even the Star Fort. These are just some ruins off to the side. We've looked at Fort Crown Point in the past. Here's a depiction of Fort Levi. We're just going to call it Fort Levi. Just a depiction. Super Star Fort. I mean, surely we have a picture today. Let's go for the coordinates one more time. Let's go for Yandex Maps. A Russian site. Oh, see how kind they are. Still not letting us zoom in much. poor resolution. But yeah, somewhere out there. Castle Williams. So Castle Williams is a fort. Here's the fort in 1812. You see how dumbed down it looks, even though it's still impressive. And here it is today. There we go. In the water, up to the water, in ruins. Okay, Fort Macon in North Carolina. Here we go. Look at the condition of this thing. Look at this pit. You just throw people into this pit. They disobey. I mean, look at this thing. Come on. And then the stupid cannon on top, like a little mosquito on a giant. So here we go, out in the water. Fort Wood and the Statue of Liberty. Fort, here we go. A fort with a star fort. Liberty Island, Starfort Island. The statue, a mere ornament compared to everything under him. Fort Wood. Fort Washita in Oklahoma, 1842. Here we go. This picture was taken in 1975. I don't know if that's correct, but here is what we get. So I think I have failed. There's too many. But as you can see here, this whole chunk here in Pennsylvania, either abandoned or destroyed. Here's one that was destroyed, but we have a picture of it. What do we see? Super star fortification. Even they show us. Here is a model of it. Thank you, at least something. And here is where it's sat today. There we go. Just some bricks in a park. Amazing. Here is your old world and how much it was appreciated. This is pretty mind-blowing. I think I'll have to do a part 2. Puerto Rico. We've looked at the forts in Puerto Rico before. Just have a little peek at this one. Fort San Juan. Look at this. Just the base. Just the pedestal. It looks like someone has paved on top of it. Maybe somebody's little helicopter landing pad. And a little close-up. Rhode Island. Fort Adams. Even in the old plans, looking so futuristic, super star geometry. And here's an aerial view of her, just buried and uninteresting, and more importantly, like I started off the video with, not discussed in our history. And I'm grateful for whoever compiled this list. Maybe it was an AI, I don't know. But here you go, have a little peek and see what can be discovered, because we didn't even scratch the surface today. Thanks for being here this week. I love you all. God bless, and I'll see you soon.